they will say, well, as a person with autism, you should know. And it'll be very, very pointed. It'll be just like that, like so much stress on you're gonna be hearing me. You're probably in the background throughout this thing, so just try to ignore that because it's never quiet here. I say that every video now. So today I want to be talking about something that bothers me oh so much. If you watch this video, you probably don't do this, but maybe someone's gonna come across this video and maybe you do it, and that's why I'm making this video, because I know it's happened to me so many times that I can't be the only person that this just bothers me so much, and it has happened to me so many times. If you're new here, my name is Cami and I am autistic. I was not diagnosed until I was an adult. At least 4 of my 5 children are also autistic. The 5th is actually in the process of being evaluated, and my husband is also autistic. And so, welcome if you're new here, and everybody else, welcome too. So what I'm talking about today it has to do with person-first language and identity-first language. In the beginning, I kind of switched back and forth a lot. When our first daughter got her diagnosis, I didn't really think about the difference that much. I'd heard autistic, I'd heard person with autism, and I didn't give much thought to it. And then I used autistic in a group with other autism moms, which, if you don't know, it's not a term that is really looked well on in a lot of autistic communities. I'm not gonna get into that right now, but people don't really love that term. I use the word autistic, and I had a lot of people jump down my throat and tell me how disrespectful it was, how my child was so much more than her disability, how she was so much more than just autism, and when I said autistic, I was just making it all about this one thing that was about her, and she was so much more than that. And I was kind of blown away because I'd kind of just gotten I felt like I'd gotten beat up in this group. And after that, I was so careful to not say autistic again for years. And so in the beginning, when I started this channel, if you look back at my early videos, I'm so careful. I never say the word. All of them are tagged with with autism. And then I started hearing more stuff from autistic advocates, which I'd been reading all along, but I didn't see that much stuff in the beginning about identity first language. Like, I would read about other things, but it just, I guess, identity first language wasn't that much on my radar at the time. It wasn't, the topics that I was reading about were more about raising autistic kids and less about identity first language and how to speak. Life went on. And for a while I probably wasn't reading much of anything at all because I was just in survival mode, getting by day to day and figuring out how to do this whole thing, because I mean, at one point we had a 0, 2, 4, 6 and 8-year-olds, and I was just trying to figure out how we were gonna live day to day. And not sleeping much and changing so many diapers, and life was kind of hectic, very hectic. But then I started hearing more and more about person first versus identity first language and the explanations for it, and I realized that I really liked identity first language a lot. In fact, I preferred it. But at that point, I didn't really feel like I could make the argument because I didn't have a diagnosis yet. Like, I had my suspicions, but whenever I would mention them to people, generally I would get shot down. People would be like, oh yeah, no, well, everyone's a little bit autistic, so you're just, it's a spectrum. And I would be like, oh yeah, I guess so I kept it to myself for another 3 or 4 years, because I think the first time I mentioned it was right after Maggie was diagnosed, and I mentioned it to some therapists and they were like, yeah, everyone has things like that. So fast forward 7 years, and we're now, and I don't care how other autistic people choose to identify, but I do know that I've seen some really huge surveys with thousands of people, and it usually ends up that about 90% of autistic people prefer identity first language. So most of us, in fact, way more than most of us, like very close to all of us, but not all of us, prefer identity first language. The vast majority, though, you can safely say, tend to prefer identity first language. I'm not going to go out and argue with people. People can use person first language if they want, identity first language if they want, whatever they feel comfortable with. There's some major scripting going on out there. This is kind of the general sound of our house, if you're here. And I just have to tell you, just quickly, Maggie's managed to find a way to take over all the electronics in our house with Paul's Android from work. All of them, like even lights that are not smart lights that have Bluetooth that we didn't know had Bluetooth. She's been taking over all the electronics in our house. New talent that she has that we didn't even know that thing was capable of. Anyways, back to this. That's a different video, but anyways, so person first, identity first language. The thing I have to say really bothers me the most. What happens to me the most is usually when I'm talking to doctors, not all doctors, therapists, not all therapists, because there's some really great ones that don't do this. And we'll be talking, and I'm always nervous at this point because I know how they've been trained. I know that they've been trained and probably had it hammered in during school that it's person first language and not identity first language. And that's just, it's part of their training. I feel comfortable with identity first language. Being autistic is a part of who I am. It's how my brain works. It's how I experience the world. And I don't feel like I should have to change that for other people. And so I'm finally at a place where I'm comfortable using identity first language, that I'm not hiding that part of myself. And so usually, whether I'm talking about my kids or myself, when I say the word autistic, sometimes people correct me right away, but a lot of people don't correct me right away. But what they'll do is, like, a few seconds later, and this is what I hate so much, is in their next sentence, they will say, well, as a person with autism, you should know. And it'll be very, very pointed. It'll be just like that, like so much stress on the person first language. All of the emphasis is on that. And it's just, it's so frustrating. It's insulting. And okay, I'm the person here who has the diagnosis and the disability, and you don't get to tell me to use person first language. You just don't. And it really bothers me so much. I know I can't be the only one in this, but it's happened at least a half dozen times, and I was only diagnosed 8 months ago. So I'm averaging very close to once a month. So for people who've been diagnosed longer, I'm sure it's happened so many times that you probably lost count. It's just really irritating. Anyways, I'm losing light here, so I should probably go because my light's broken. My favorite light is broken. Anyways, that was it. Just don't. If you're autistic, you know, person first, identity first, use what you feel comfortable with. But if you're not, don't go around telling someone else what they are, that they can't use identity first language because you learned something in school a year or 2 years or 20 years ago. Because this is what most of the autistic community prefers. And it isn't some textbook's job or some instructor's wrong to tell you that the people who actually live with this disability, are part of this community, are wrong. So it's time to change the thinking on that. It's time to change what's being taught in universities and in schools about this. Listen to the community, and then if someone corrects you and says, oh, actually I prefer person first, use it then. But you don't get to correct people and say, oh, honey, actually you're a person with autism. That is it for today. If you like this video, we would love it if you'd give it a thumbs up, and if you're interested in all things autism, I'd love it if you'd hit subscribe, and I'll see you tomorrow.